But when we decide that the hunger of Americans is a afterthought to the the ever increasing, the nonstop increases to defense contractors, then we have a problem. We have a serious problem. The Biden administration has given up quite a few things for this nonsense debt ceiling non-catastrophe to pass over like it does every single year. Chief among them being cuts, being or at least like one of the, I think, really damning ones is adding more work requirements to people who are already on food assistance, making it a little bit harder for people to get food. And now the bill has made it through the House, which I was kind of curious to see if it would, but it seems like it has, what's it called? It has passed. I'm looking at the votes right now. Looks like it did pass through the Senate with 313. Wow, a lot of Democrats, actually. 149 Republicans, 164 Democrats. Wow. Only, what is that? 116? Yeah, about 116 nays between both parties. Oh, the number's right down there at the bottom. But anyway, let's go take a look and see how this is turning out, shall we? All right. Senate races to wrap up Biden-McCarthy debt ceiling bill before default audit or default deadline. I don't know why I said audit. Let's zoom in just a bit. I need bigger text. I'm old. Right. Days away from the default crisis, the U.S. Senate dashed on Thursday to wrap up work on a debt ceiling and budget cuts package that overwhelmingly cleared the House. Oh, yeah. Let's actually. Here's what's in it. Okay. There we go. Yeah, 2-year debt limit suspension. The agreement would keep non-defense spending roughly flat in the 2024 fiscal year and increase it by 1% the following year, as well as suspend the debt limit until January of 2025, past the next presidential election. For the next fiscal year, the bill matches Biden's proposed defense budget of $886 billion and allots $704 billion for non-defense spending. Lovely. Thumbs down for sure. Absolutely. What really gets me about this is Biden and his administration gave up so fucking much just for what, a couple cuts, like stuff that didn't even need to be cut. It's ridiculous. Like, we're really gonna talk about budgeting here while approving 886 billion more dollars going to defense spending. Like, of course. Legislation aims to limit the federal budget growth to 1% for the next 6 years, but that provision would not be enforceable starting in 2025. Overall, the Congressional Budget Office projected Tuesday that the bill would reduce the budget deficits by $1.5 trillion over the next decade. Do you know how you could also close that gap? You could increase taxes on the wealthiest Americans among us. But, the agreement, Veterans Care, the agreement would fully fund medical care for veterans at the levels included in Biden's proposed 24 budget blueprint. Okay, so basically no extra money, just the exact money that always got that they were already going to put into the budget, including a fund dedicated to veterans who have been exposed to toxic substances or environmental hazards. Biden sought $20.3 billion for the Toxic Exposure Fund in his budget. That's at least something. That's one good thing, I suppose. Unspent COVID money. The agreement would rescind about $30 billion in unspent coronavirus relief money that Congress approved through previous bills. It claws back unobligated money from dozens of federal programs that received aid during the pandemic, including rental assistance, small business loans, and broadband for rural areas. Cool. So if you wanted broadband and you live in a rural area, go fuck yourself. Legislation protects pandemic funding for veterans' medical care, housing assistance, the Indian Health Service, and some $5 billion for a program focused on rapidly developing the next generation of COVID-19 vaccines and treatments. Lovely. IRS funding. Republicans targeted money that the IRS was allotted last year to crack down on tax fraud. The bill bites into some IRS funding, rescinding $1.4 billion. Budget scorekeepers said the change would increase deficits by $900 million because less enforcement. What the fuck is the White House has said that the deal also includes an agreement to take $20 billion from the IRS over the next 2 years and use that money for other non-defense. Oh, for fuck's sake. Oh, man. Jesus. Like, what's really funny is they're talking about, oh, we really need to cut the budget. We really need to, like, get control of our debt here. Meanwhile, costing us $900 million again. Like this is a $900 million cost that we're eating to pick up what? 1.4 billion? Like, fucking stupid. And something that's actually, and keep in mind, the only reason why Republicans want this is because their donors told them, hey, you need to get the IRS off our backs. That's the only reason. The agreement would expand work requirements for the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, SNAP. Let's see, a longtime Republican priority, but the changes are pared down from the House-passed debt ceiling bill. Work requirements already exist for most able-bodied adults between the ages of 18 and 49. The bill would phase in higher age limits, bringing the maximum age to 54 by 2025. But the provision expires, bringing the maximum age down to age 49 5 years later in 2030. So what the fuck is the point of increasing it then? Ay. And keep in mind, they're going to try to frame this, and I've already heard McCarthy try to frame this as like, if you're some 20-year-old sitting on the couch. But keep in mind, considering that they've now increased this to 54, the reality is there's probably going to be just as many. I'd be interested to see the numbers of how many older Americans end up losing their SNAP benefits now, due to this bill. This is just kicking more people off of food stamps. Democrats also won some expanded benefits for veterans, homeless people, and young people aging out of foster care. That would also expire in 2030, according to the agreement. The agreement would also make it slightly harder for states to waive work requirements for SNAP for certain individuals. Current law allows states to issue some exemptions to the work rules on a discretionary basis, but limits how many people can be exempted. The agreement would lower the number of exemptions that a state can issue and curb states' ability to carry over the number of exemptions they can hand out from month to month. Lovely. The agreement would also make changes to temporary assistance to needy families programs, which gives cash aid to families with children. Let's see. While not going as far as the House bill had proposed, the deal would make adjustments to a credit that allows states to require fewer recipients to work, updating and readjusting the credit to make it harder for states to avoid. Lovely. Let's see. Speeding up money projects. The deal puts in place changes in the National Environment Policy Act for the first time in nearly 4 decades that would designate a single lead agency to develop and schedule environmental reviews. In hopes of streamlining the process, it also simplifies some of the requirements for environmental reviews, including placing length limitations on environmental assessments and impact statements. Great. Let's see. Also simplifies some of the requirements for environmental reviews. Okay. Including placing length limitations in environmental assessments. Oh, my goodness. Agencies will be given 1 year to complete environmental reviews, and projects that are deemed to have complex impacts on the environment will need to be reviewed within 2 years. The bill will also gives special treatment to the Mountain Valley Pipeline, a West Virginia natural gas pipeline championed by Senator Joe Manchin and Shelley Moore Capito by approval. What the fuck is this? What is this? Mountain Valley Pipeline. Mountain Valley Pipeline. Debt ceiling deal bulldozes Mountain Valley pipelines. Let's see. Manchin could get a gas pipeline out of the debt ceiling. Oh, lovely. If I do Wikipedia, let's see. Natural gas pipeline. I want to know who raised the debt ceiling. Debt ceiling includes surprise approval, natural gas pipeline. Fucking. And like, this is the nuts thing, is that Biden would allow this to even be put in here. Meanwhile, Joe Manchin has done everything he possibly can to hold up his agenda, and he still gives him this type of shit. Let's see. Manchin. I want to see if he's fucking invested into this. Let's see. Ooh, here we go. Let's see. Wall Street Journal. No, this is opinion. I don't. CNN Manchin could get, okay, fine. We'll see. We'll see if, I want to know if, let's see. Joe Manchin's months-long effort to greenlight the controversial a project that will pipe methane gas across parts of West Virginia and Virginia is likely to prevail. Manchin helped secure a provision in the deal that would compel federal agencies to approve all remaining permits for the of course, the conservative Democrat from the who's been critical. All of a sudden, White House did their while attaching the pipeline must pass legislation. Delighted, literally, they're changing the rules. Environmental groups exhort. Yeah, dude, fuck this guy. Officials say they defended Biden's major climate law and the debt ceiling. 300-mile long pipeline which transport gas from Virginia's Marcellus and Utica shale areas to Virginia. The pipeline would cross waterways and federal national forest lands, which is why it went through complex. The project has been severely delayed in part because several court challenges. Let's see. Tim Kaine, Democrat from Virginia, also plans to file a Senate amendment. Just that. I want to know why the fuck, but like, we already know Joe Manchin is already very well connected to the oil industry. MVP and debt ceiling agreement. What the fuck? Yeah, I want to know how financially what's it called? Why debt ceiling deal angers client? Yeah, no shit. But I want to know if he's making money off of this. I have no doubt that he probably is through donations, but I'm curious if he's like I'd be interested to know if he's like financially tied to this. I wouldn't be shocked. Manchin introduced third version of permitting reform bill. Bill declares permit violations, water quality permits thrown out of time. Joe Manchin, other MVP proponents. Ignoring the facts. Okay. I'll have to do some digging. I'm like super curious. This dude is like easily one of the most corrupt politicians we have, but anyway, agencies will give him okay. Student loans. Republicans have long sought to reel back the Biden administration's effort to provide student loan relief and aid to millions of borrowers during the coronavirus pandemic. While the GOP proposal to rescind the White House's plan to waive $10,000 to $20,000 in debt for nearly all borrowers failed to make it into the package, Biden agreed to put an end to the pause on student loan. Oh my God, you fucking idiot. The fate of Biden's broader student loan relief, meanwhile, will be decided at the Supreme Court, which is dominated 6-3 by conservative wing. During oral arguments in the case, several of the justices expressed deep skepticism about the legality of Biden's plan. A decision is expected before the end of June. Great. What's left out? Let's see. House Republicans passed legislation last month that would have created new work requirements for some Medicaid recipients. That was left out of the final agreement. The idea faced stiff opposition from the White House and congressional Democrats, who said it would lead to few people able to afford food or health care without actually increasing the number of people in the workforce. Also absent from the final deal is the GOP proposal to repeal many of the clean energy tax credits Democrats passed in party line votes last year, boost the production and consumption of clean energy. McCarthy and Republicans have argued that the tax breaks distort the market and waste tax. I'm sorry, distorting the market. It's not like the stock market does that constantly with how much speculation there is. Like distorting the stock market. That just means changing it, honestly. The White House has defended the tax credits as resulting in hundreds of billions of dollars in private sector investments, creating thousands of manufacturing jobs in the U.S. Lovely. So essentially what we got was less funding for the IRS, which is going to cost us $900 million, clawing back COVID money that could have been used for even like small like local projects could have been used in that. Let's see. We got some money for veterans care, but honestly, like this $20 billion for toxic exposure is kind of it. Let's see. We added more work requirements, kicking more people off of food assistance if they need it. Joe Manchin got a pipeline along with reducing. Yeah, it looks like making it a little bit, more difficult for the EPA to actually do their impact assessments, which is great. And Biden fucking folded on student loans. So, from a political standpoint, I honestly think the student loan thing is going to end up being what sinks Biden for a lot of young people. Because keep in mind, if you're a young person, right? If you like went to school, you know, racked up like an ungodly amount of debt, right? You did all of that. And Joe Biden Donald Trump actually, during the coronavirus, put your payments on pause because you obviously couldn't pay them. And Joe Biden continued that along with forwarding a proposal to at the very least forgive a very small fraction, a smaller fraction than what he had initially promised during the campaign. And now it looks like he's not even going to do that. So, if you're like a young person, with an election coming up, this is the type of dumb shit that Democrats do right before elections to guarantee losses. Like, utterly stupid. But anyway, let's get back. That overwhelmingly cleared the House, aiming to send it to Joe Biden's desk to become law before fast approaching deadline. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said the chamber was digging into the bill that Biden negotiated with McCarthy and would keep working until the job is done. Keep in mind, Bernie Sanders isn't even voting for this shit. Biden should have just invoked the 14th, called it a day, and done none of this shit. But unfortunately, he's a coward. Let's see. He warned of a crush of ideas from senators anxious to revise the bill's budget and cuts and environmental policy changes, but said there is no good reason, none, to bring this process down to the wire. Passage in the Senate will require cooperation between Democrats and Republicans, much the way the narrowly divided House was able to approve the compromise late Wednesday night. Fast action is vital if Washington is to meet next Monday's deadline, when Treasury has said the U.S. will start running short of cash to pay its bills, risking a devastating default. Having remained largely on the sidelines during much of the Biden-McCarthy negotiations, several senators are insisting on debate over their ideas to reshape the package, but making any changes at this stage seemed unlikely. And even opponents of the final deal say they will not hold it up. Like Schumer, Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell signaled he wanted to waste no time. Touting the House package with its budget cuts, McConnell said Thursday, the Senate has a chance to make that important progress a reality. Hard-fought compromise pleased few in its entirety, but lawmakers assessed it was better than the alternative, economic upheaval at home and abroad if Congress failed to act. Tensions had run high in the House as hard right Republicans refused the deal, but Biden and McCarthy assembled a bipartisan coalition to push past the robust 314 to 117 vote. Yeah. So, there are people online who will say, who will say, stuff like, the uniparty and stuff like that. And while a lot of that is, conspiratorial, keep in mind, there is a understanding between both parties that at the end of the day, they're not going to push against or do anything that corporate donors have told them not to. But speaking of people who the donors don't tell anything to, I want to see what Bernie Sanders had to say about this.
The House is expected to pass the debt ceiling deal. Once it does, the bill's going to head to the Senate, where Senate Majority Leader Schumer has promised quick action.
I cannot stress enough that we have no margin.
Goddamn, dude.
For error. Either we proceed quickly and send this bipartisan agreement to the president's desk, or the federal government will default for the first time ever.
There are still lots of timing negotiations going on in the Senate. Several senators have already said they will be voting no. Among them, Bernie Sanders. Sanders said that while the debt ceiling deal could have been much worse, he cannot, quote, vote for a bill that takes nutrition assistance away from women, infants, children, and seniors.
And keep in mind, the people who are taking assistance from women, infants, and children, that's the Republican Party. The Republican Party are the ones who are proposing cuts that will take food out of the mouth of children. That's the pro-life party position.
And that fast-tracks the, quote, disastrous Mountain Valley pipeline at a time that the future of the world is literally at stake. And Senator Sanders, an independent of Vermont, and chair of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, joins me now. Senator, was this a hard or easy decision to get to on this vote once you were able to survey the 99 pages of the deal?
It was not a difficult decision. Look, the bottom line is, in America today, we have more income and wealth inequality than we've ever had. People on top doing phenomenally well, middle class struggling, lower income people really facing desperate times. And you don't do deficit reduction in any moral sense on the backs of some of the people in this country who are barely making it right now. Meanwhile, the wealthiest people in this country who are doing phenomenally well will pay no more in taxes. Large corporations that have raised profits, seen huge increases in their profits in recent years, they're not going to be asked to pay a nickel more in taxes. As you indicated, there's going to be a disastrous pipeline to be expedited at a time when the scientists tell us we got to do exactly the opposite, cut back on fossil fuel production. So to my mind, and I should also add, in 2-year time, a $56 billion increase in military spending, despite the fact that the Pentagon is the only federal agency not to have been audited. Massive waste and fraud in the Pentagon. They get $56 billion more.
Haven't they like never passed an audit also? Which doesn't really shock me that much. It's the military. Like the idea that they're not going to pass an audit kind of makes sense to me. There's also probably a lot of just like, like redacted information or redacted charges basically. But like, when we talk about our debt, when we talk about our government's like economic health in this country, there are basically two ways that you solve that. You can either increase taxes or you can cut spending. Now, at the end of the day, which one you pick and where and how you go about both of those things also tell us like where your priorities lie. Like a combination of those things and where you make those cuts or where you increase those taxes tell us a lot about our society's priorities basically. Because it's like, all right, could we increase taxes? Yeah, absolutely. We could 100% increase taxes. Now the question becomes, who do we increase them on? How do we, control those increases? Well, from my point of view, we increase taxes on the wealthiest 1% on the stock market. There are a lot of solutions that you could implement that would not affect regular, everyday Americans, would not increase their taxes, but would claw back a lot of money from people who are incredibly wealthy. But it's not what we did. We didn't increase taxes. We instead decided to cut spending. And we didn't decide to cut spending from one of our largest expenditures, that being defense. For all of you, all of you anti-Ukraine folks, this should bug the shit out of you too. What we decided to do instead was make budget cuts to the IRS, which is basically the money grabbing apparatus that we have, the tax collecting apparatus that we have. We took money out of that, which again, I think we looked at it, is like a $7 return for every dollar you spend on the IRS. And instead we decided less people should be getting food, less people should get help with their medical bills, less people should get help, or well in this case, nobody is going to get help with their student loan debt. So when it comes down to it, we decided to take from the bottom of our society, the people who are already in need of assistance. That is where we decided to trim the fat. There are going to be people who starve because of these cuts to SNAP. There are going to be children who are more malnourished because of these cuts to SNAP. We already solved 50% of child hungriness, or what was it? I think it was child food insecurity. We already solved a lot of that during COVID. And then we just decided, nah, never mind. We're not going to continue doing that. And it went right back up. So, I mean, this all at the end of the day comes down to where your priorities lead you and what they actually are. This is revealing, regardless of what the Biden administration wants to say. This is under his administration. And regardless of whether they'll say they like it or not, these are the priorities that they chose. these are the priorities right here. Making sure less people get food, less money is collected by the government, and making sure Joe Manchin gets a pipeline that he's going to get a lot of campaign donations from, and or a lot of payment because he probably has investments into it. That's what we did this for. We took money out of your mouth so so Joe Manchin can put a fucking pipeline in and make a couple hundreds of thousands of dollars on top of already being a U.S. senator, because being a U.S. senator wasn't enough for him. It should have already been impeached. Fuck Joe Manchin.
Over the next 2 years.
So here's to me the sort of argument for the deals, to the extent there is one. And I don't think anyone on the Democratic side is particularly enthusiastic about this deal. In fact, you just may have seen Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill, who's a very centrist member of Congress. She's not like waving a flag of victory around this deal. She's going to vote for it. Basically, it goes like this. There is divided government, right? Spending and appropriations constitutionally originates in the House. It's going to have to be, whatever the government spends this year, is going to have to be the product of some sort of compromise between a Republican-controlled House and Democratic-controlled Senate and a White House. That's just the case. And this is basically about what you would expect from that.
And keep in mind, we already have a process for that. This isn't the same thing as going over like the expenditures. This isn't passing a budget resolution, right? Like, that's not what this is. Like, every single year we have a budget debate, and I'm fine with us having a budget debate. You can, if you want to bring up all of this stuff in a budget debate, that's fine. But the reason why the Republican Party specifically always seizes on the debt limit is so that they can basically have a cliff to drive off of. So they can say, you either do what we want, even though, there aren't going to be a negotiation of 50-50. You get some of you want, we get some of what we want. No, they do this because they are willing to blow up the economy, or at the very least, they pretend like they are willing to blow up the economy unless they get their priorities. And Biden should have already known about this. He should have already been prepared for this. And should have already said, go fuck yourselves. We'll be fine. Like, we're not going to do this debt ceiling nonsense. You can either destroy the economy or you can shut the fuck up and come back during the normal budgeting process.
Kind of divided government.
That's a reasonable argument. I don't think it's quite accurate. I think we could have done better through the normal appropriations process. But what we are surrendering to is the Republican hijacking of the appropriations process, and basically holding the world's economy hostage. And we're surrendering to that. And Chris,
and
let's be very clear.
They're not going to do it.
In
too much of their party.
They're going to be back again, and we're going to go through this whole process again. So,
and if it's a Republican president, they're not going to talk about it at all. They're just going to increase it, and we won't hear any word about it. Because Democrats aren't willing to do the same. They're not willing to put the entire world economy at risk.
The Mountain Valley Project. Now, this is a pipeline that would bring natural gas down through Virginia and West Virginia into parts of the Southeast. This has been hung up in courts for a long time. It is a priority of Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, who you see there. There is a special language in there that protects this from judicial review, just statutorily just comes in, takes it out of the courts, gives it the permits it needs to get built. And the craziest thing about this is Tim Kaine, who represents the state of Virginia, through which the pipeline would run, says that no one from the White House called him or asked him about this, and he just found out about it in the press. What do you think of that?
Well, I think it is outrageous. I mean, and the bottom line, it's not only how they treated Tim. The bottom line is caving into Manchin, caving into the fossil fuel industry. Look, it is nobody who's watching,
which he's invested in,
doesn't understand that climate change is an existential threat to this country and the world. We got to transform our energy system, not build more pipelines. So this is just one more reason why I think the no vote is appropriate.
There is going to be an appropriations process after this. Yep. And one of the silver linings here, as I understand it, is that if the no deal is struck, the cuts end up being slightly more favorable to Democrats than a deal being struck, because defense spending will be capped in a no deal scenario. Do you think that gives you a little bit of leverage as you go through the quote-unquote normal appropriations
defense spending? And it's always like defense spending for what?
The answer is we will see.
Like, we're not fighting wars. We're not, we're not in conflict with anybody right now, but we're spending all this money on defense. You know what is happening right now? People aren't getting enough food, aren't getting enough nutrition. Kids aren't eating enough food. That is actually happening. But instead, we spend billions of dollars on more fucking missiles and more defense spending. And as and I'm supportive. I'm supportive of Ukraine and their war against Russia. I got no problem with that. But when we decide that the hunger of Americans is a afterthought to the the ever increasing, the nonstop increases to defense contractors, then we have a problem. We have a serious problem.
Certainly, our Republican friends wanted to actually increase military spending far more than is in this legislation.
Because they don't care about the debt or the deficit.
About the deficit.
That's why they,
except when it comes to tax breaks for billionaires and spending more money on the military.
All right, Senator Bernie Sanders, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, and keep in mind, the Republican pushed tax cuts from the Trump administration are a big factor into why we're just not taking in enough tax dollars. We're just not doing it. We're continuing a lot of the programs that we always have that are good programs, good popular programs, but we just decided, during the Trump administration, they decided to cut a lot of taxes for very wealthy Americans, which cost us, let's see, can I find the number? Let's see, Trump tax cuts cost. Extending Trump tax cuts would add $3.5 trillion to the deficit, according to Congressional Budget Office. And, and then they cry about the fucking debt and the deficit every time. The thing that they tell, like at the end of all YouTube videos where they tell you to like click on one of these like things to watch more videos. Yeah, I've been meaning to film one of those. So that's what I was doing. I was just setting it up to film one.